So, these are the Methane Diaries, and this is Chapter 1. Welcome to the Methane Diaries. Um, I decided to use this visual for now because this is about what I have the energy to produce after being poisoned with methane for about 10 years. And I just really don't feel like being on camera, so there's something for your eyes to look at, and all of the credits are on the screen. So, um, I haven't really known where to start when it came to what's happened with me and the methane. For one, it's affected my health quite a lot. I have a chronic sinus condition. I cough a lot. You've heard me coughing. You've seen me have sinus problems in my videos. I've tried to edit it to the best of my ability, but I also just want to be able to say stuff and record it in one go without having to hit pause every couple of minutes because I got a cough, and it's it just that alone has been so much trouble. But I mean, everything else has been pretty bad too. I think the biggest thing when it comes to what are the results of methane poisoning for 10 years is, well, look at my oeuvre for this whole channel, really. And I'll get to talking to about my channel in just a second, but I just wanted to make a note. If the graphics skip uh, very abruptly, or the sound seems to skip very abruptly, then I've had to pause because I was coughing. Um, it maybe for some emphasis, it it might be better to just leave the coughing in so people know just how bad it gets. But to me, it's gross. I don't want it on camera, so I'm trying to edit out my coughing as much as possible. So if you see a jump in the video, I was coughing or sneezing. So, the effect on my channel. Well, I have done this entire YouTube channel under the effects of methane poisoning. So there's that. If you look back through my entire channel, you can see the content produced by somebody who was actively being poisoned by methane and often did not know it. Um, I would say that is true for every single video on my channel because I did move out of the house that had the methane leak and sewage gas problems back in May of this year, but all of my stuff uh, has been kind of suffused with methane, and so until last month, in the middle of last month, I've still been exposed to methane all of this time. Just like I'd say a lot less of it than was in the original house, but it's been kind of leaching out of all of the boxes from the place I moved from. And every time that I would try to unpack those boxes, I would get sick again. So I'd only be able to get through like a couple of boxes and then have to stop, and then I'd wonder, like, why am I feeling sick? Why am I getting weird thoughts? Why are weird things happening? Yeah, I can't edit out every sniffle. But why are my sinuses so bad? It's because methane poisoning is still happening because my stuff is still oozing methane. I managed to take all of the boxes and put them into a separate room, and we're gonna kind of figure out where to go from there. So now I can just not not be around it, like, while in the course of day to day stuff, but it's still a going concern. How do we get rid of the methane? How do we get all of our stuff clean? If you know the story, the Velveteen Rabbit, it's from the point of view of a toy that basically has been infected with like pneumonia or something, and all of the toys have been exposed to pneumonia, and so The solution is to burn them all. Like, none of your stuff that you had while you were sick is going to be around anymore because it's all going to be burned. And so I don't want to burn all my stuff. I want to use some of my stuff, but there's like a lot of my stuff that I just like have not interacted with in quite a long time because I can't take it out of the box. Um, so I'm still dealing with that. I'm still dealing with a lot of things, and it's meant that it's been very hard to manage this channel, and it's also been hard to talk about what's been going on because it's hard to talk about what's going on while it's going on. But enough has kind of calmed down that I can start talking about what happened during the methane exposure, what's going on now after the methane exposure, and I I want to talk about some things that I don't think anybody has really had a chance to talk about when it comes to methane exposure because the thing is, all of this has been happening while I've been an active occultist. And what that means is that like I practice ceremonial magic like you'll find in masonry or uh, like Victorian secret societies, and doing that while literally being gaslit with actual gas, that same type gas, by the way, has meant that I have had a very interesting experience of occultism. Um, Quite counter to what I think people would expect, in fact. And so some of what I want to do is document occultism under the effects of uh, this kind of substance exposure that was not purposeful. There are a lot of occultists who have purposefully exposed themselves to entheogens as a part of their magical work. But I did not purposefully expose myself to methane during the course of my occultist studies. It was something that happened to me while I was largely unaware of it. So, does that mean that all of the work that I did is completely invalid? Or does it mean that, well, what does it mean? And that's kind of been one of the questions I've gotten stuck at. I can't answer that question yet. I think that this set of diaries is my attempt to try to find an answer to that question of okay, if I was doing some kind of meaningful spiritual work while also unknowingly under the influence of a mind altering substance, then what is the meaning to what I experienced? Is there something more to what I experienced that I wasn't understanding at the time because of this? Uh, and when it comes to spiritual interactions, deity interactions, there were times where I got messages from spirits to the tune of, "Hey, something's interfering and we don't understand what's going on because this shouldn't be happening like this. We're not really sure what the interference is, but there's definitely something going on, and we know that at some point this stops happening, that there's some point in the future where you don't have this interference, and so you know it's it's difficult, and it turned out the interference was the methane. um, I mean, if you're a spirit, how do you know what's going on in the physical world other than observing through the physical world's participants? And if you're observing through somebody who is unknowingly being exposed to mind altering substances, then how do you as a spirit get a grasp on what's going on in the physical world? I do believe that spirits have limitations, that deities have limitations. I mean, it kind of says so right there on the tin for some of them. Like, this deity can't do so and so thing, they do this thing instead. This deity is specifically presiding over this part of the world, so it doesn't have influence over this part of the world. I mean, Zeus is the king of the gods and everything, but he specifically has power over the sky. If you want to have anything happen in the ocean, he can't do that. You have to go through Poseidon. I mean, there's limits to their domains, and there's limits to their abilities, even if they are godlike abilities, literally godly abilities. And I think one of those limitations is gods cannot perceive the world. Um, their perception of the world is going to be sometimes as good as any physical inhabitant of the world. They might be able to see through an ant's eyes or see through a bird's eyes, but when they see through a bird's eyes, they're not going to be able to see any better than that bird sees. They're limit if they're going to use a physical vessel, they take on the limitations of that physical vessel. That's part of the point of taking on a physical vessel, is that physics is a kind of limitation. So there is a lot that I have to examine when it comes to some of the experiences that I had, or the things that I was told by deities and spirits while under the influence of methane. Um, what does that mean? Um, and is there anything that can be learned from this experience um, that would be useful for anyone? I understand that there's things that could be useful when it comes to like medical observations and it comes to treatments and all of that, and that's something that I and my husband are looking at as a family. Like we're looking at that outside of this, but this channel is my occultism channel. Like, um, and so I want to talk about what it's like to be an occultist going through this, because it's been a very occult experience. It's That's actually been kind of one of the surprising parts to me, is how very occult this experience has been. I thought it was all going to be garbage. Like, once I found out that methane was responsible for some of the warped perceptions that I was having and some of the strange experiences that we were going through, then I kind of wanted to just throw it all out, baby bathwater and all, and be like, hey, it turns out this was all BS and nothing is actually true. But I can't really say that. What I can say is that reality is different than what I thought it was before. That I did not have the view of reality that people normally have when experiencing reality. And um, the thing is, that's actually a part of the occult experience, is going through a experience of reality that is outside the norm but still part of the natural world. One of the things that intrigues me is that I had a very transformative and warped experience of reality, but it's all completely physically explainable. Um, there were times where I was seeing things or having perceptions that were not explainable at the time, and um, knowing that there is actually an explanation for them does not make them less occult. It actually makes it more interesting to me, because, like, what if a deity or a spirit wants to get a message to someone, and the only way they can get that message through is by a kind of manifestation of madness? How do you manifest madness in someone who doesn't have a pre-existing mental condition? I mean, one of the ways is by exposure to substances that warp their perceptions. and I've certainly had a lot of warped perceptions. So, um, I think one of the things that's made this all difficult is I only found out about the methane in May of this year, but I've been doing online occultism, like documenting my occult experience since 2013, which was a year after I moved into the house that turned out to have a methane leak in it. So that's 10 solid years of being in a slow methane leak and slowly having more and more exposure to methane. And I don't really know how many people go through this while also uh, keeping up an occult altar and having communion with spirits and channeling and doing a whole bunch of magic. I don't know how much this happens to people. I do know that there are some people who think that, say, the Oracle. There's a Greek Oracle. I forget the location, but there are a lot of people who think that the Oracle was sitting on top of a volcanic vent and gas was coming up from the volcanic vents and causing the visions that the Oracle was having. And that gas would, in fact, be partially composed of methane. And I can't help but agree that that may have actually been a factor. And that may have been something they knew. I think that sometimes the way people present this Oracle at Delphi, it was at Delphi. The way that people have presented this theory is like, oh, well, they thought they were having godly visions, but it turns out it was just gas. And it's like, well, but I mean, it's hard not to know that gas is there when it's coming out of a big volcanic vent. I think they very well knew that there was gas there and that the gas was warping people's perceptions. The whole point was that there was a person there who could actually like sit through all of that and still tell you visions, and that the gas itself was helping them perceive something beyond. Like, in the entire point of the oracle was that they were going to tell you things that people couldn't normally know. They were having an experience of reality that people don't normally have. So, one, I think it could have been like volcanic gases that were causing that, but two, I think it could have still been a very spiritual, very true experience. You, whether or not the methane is there doesn't determine whether or not the visions are accurate. It more affects, I would say, that your ability to lead a normal life, um, to get the minutia of life going, to have social interactions, to get the paperwork done, do basic math. I mean, if you're an oracle, do you really need to do all that? Because I think that could have just been the trade off. The thing is, they knew they were doing that. If they were, in fact, exposing themselves to gas to be oracles, I think that the oracle at Delphi was, like, very clearly knew that they were being exposed to a poisonous substance and probably regulated their exposure of it to some extent, um, by positioning themselves in a certain way, or by only being present at that spot for a certain amount of time and, sleeping somewhere else. Um, so when it comes to my exposure, that was all accidental, and I never could go home from it because it was in my home. I was sleeping in that. I was eating in that. I was having my entire experience of life in that. I got away from it whenever I went to work, but in 2020, I actually quit my job because I was having so much trouble um, doing regular day to day job stuff, and I couldn't figure out why. Um, and it turned out to be largely in part to the methane exposure that I was having trouble holding down a job. So that meant that I was now home all the time. So from 2020 to halfway into 2023, basically 2.5 years, I was exposed to methane all the time. Um, and I could definitely see a change in my behavior around that time, because that's also whenever we had a big sewage leak happen. So it kind of increased the amount of exposure, because not only was there the methane from the natural gas hookup in the house, but there was also uh, a sewage problem in which sewage gas was building up in the house. Um, and so towards the end, the exposure increased dramatically, not just because I was home all the time, but also because there was just more methane in the house, I think. Um, I might get into the minutia of like how did this get so bad that nobody noticed? How did it last this long? Um, what did we do about it? Um, kind of stuff in a later episode. Um, in this one, I really just want to talk about being an occultist exposed to methane, um, and the fact that that happened. Just kind of introduce this concept. Um, it's something that happened to me that I am still processing. I'm still finding out just what were the effects of this mentally, emotionally, physically, financially. Um, I'm still understanding what it is that happened to me, and part of the way that I'm reaching that understanding is by um, doing this video diary. And so I'm gonna be having multiple episodes of this, kind of talking over different topics. Um, and so, uh, if you have questions, you can ask them in the comments. My husband will go through the comments and see if there's anything that I can answer, and I'll try to answer what it is that I can. Um, I can't guarantee an answer for every question, and some things I may just leave to science, because I'm largely here to talk about the mystical. And I I thought that this channel would be about a lot of different things than what it became, because I thought that I wasn't being exposed to methane all that time and I was breathing clean air. Now that I've gone through all of that and I'm looking back at it, it's actually very difficult to look back on my own content because it's very confusing to me. And so I'm just going to say, like, all the stuff that I made before, I made unknowingly under methane exposure, and I just don't really know how to think about that yet or how to talk about it. I'm kind of still getting there through this. And I'm just going to keep kind of making more entries in this diary to, one, share with all of you what this experience was like, and two, to kind of understand it myself. And uh, I don't really know where this will go. I'm still gaining an understanding of what it is that happened. I don't have a very clear memory of everything. There are a lot of things that I've had to ask my husband, like, hey, at this point, what was going on? Because I can't remember it accurately. Sometimes I have memories where it is a very mystical kind of experience, and I'm perceiving a situation from like five different realities at once. And so my memory of it, I can't remember exactly what someone said. I can remember generally what happened, but I have this memory of like different points of view of the room being different from these different points of view of like sometimes there's different people there than anybody else remembers there. It's like, different versions of reality. Thanks, Methane. So, um, I think that is actually a valid way to view reality. It's just not the one that we normally use. I think that to have a day to day profitable, productive life in human society right now, you typically need to shut out the entire experience of multiple other realities and only focus in on this one reality. And a lot of the mystical, spiritual experience that people have, a lot of their experiences are about other realities or different ways of perceiving reality itself. I experienced reality in many different strange ways, and I I'm interested in talking about how that went down. Um, I do not want to repeat my experience with methane. I'm not interested in having it again. I'm not interested in going through a similar experience with a different drug. I have used entheogens before, and it is much different than going through methane. Um, and so I'm not swearing off entheogens entirely. It's just that like I don't want to, like, for instance, try acid to see if it's comparable to going through the methane experience. That's not something that I'm really interested in doing. Um, I am more just trying to become at peace with the experience that I've already had, and to gain more understanding of what it is that I went through and maybe why I went through it that way. Um, I I do not think that the occult is full of easy answers, and so I'm willing to let this be complicated, and I'm willing to basically explore it further and see what there is to learn from it. But I don't have a lot of preconceived notions as to what this was and what it was all about. I'm kind of coming at it with an open mind. Um, I I don't feel like I have a lot of beliefs at stake here. I'm pretty open minded about the world, and I don't make a lot of assumptions about what's in it. I let it kind of define itself to me as things go forward. And so now I'm just kind of observing it further. So I think that's it for this episode of the Methane Diaries. If you've listened through this whole thing, thanks. Sorry, it's going to be really confusing. When it comes to all the other material on my channel, I, I might finish some of that. You know, at some point, I want to record some audiobooks of the books that I was already trying to record before, but I think that I'll have a lot better time recording them this time because I'll have a lot better health while doing it. So there are some projects that got interrupted on my channel because um, like health got in the way, and I will pick those up when I can, and it may take quite a while, but I will share my experience with you as much as I am able to and when I am able to. And thanks for going down this path with me, and thanks for your interest. See you in the future.